Let us travel back in time to a quieter era, New Zealand in the 1940s. The world is at war, but here, in this peaceful corner of the South Pacific, life moves at a slower pace. The air is crisp, the streets are hushed, and the warm glow of kerosene lamp spills from kitchen windows. Tonight, we follow a teenager, perhaps 15 or 16, as they settle into their evening routine. It is a time of rations and radio broadcasts, of handmade comforts and simple pleasures. Imagine, if you will, a small wooden house, its weatherboard walls painted a soft cream or faded green. A picket fence lines the front garden where rosemary and lavender grow in tidy clumps. Inside, the floors are polished wood, worn smooth by years of foot traffic. There's a coal range in the kitchen, its warmth seeping into the room, and a wireless set crackling softly in the corner. Our teenager has just returned home from school. Their satchel, made of sturdy canvas, rests on a hook by the door. Inside it, a well-thumbed arithmetic book, a pencil stub, and perhaps a carefully wrapped sandwich from lunch, saved for later. Their shoes, polished leather, slightly scuffed, are placed neatly on a mat. Socks are darned at the heels, a small sign of thrift in a time when every scrap is saved and reused. In the kitchen, their mother or grandmother stirs a pot of soup, thick with barley, carrots, and a little mutton, stretched to feed the family. The scent of onions and herbs fills the air. A loaf of homemade bread cools on a wire rack, its crust golden and faintly dusty with flour. There are no luxuries here, no excess, just wholesome, hearty food made with care. Upstairs, the teenager's bedroom is simple but cozy. A narrow iron bedstead, its mattress stuffed with wool, a patchwork quilt stitched together from old dresses and shirts. On the dresser, a hairbrush with a bakelite handle, a tin of lavender-scented ointment for chapped hands, and a small photograph of a family member away at war, framed in pressed cardboard. As evening falls, the family gathers around the wireless. The news is sobering, but there are also lighter moments, a comedy show, a music program. The teenager might sketch in a notebook or mend a torn hem while listening. Outside, the cicadas hum, and the last rays of sunlight gild the hills in the distance. This is a world of small rituals, of quiet resilience. There is no rushing, no frenzy, just the steady rhythm of a life shaped by necessity and nurtured by kindness. In the next part, we'll step into the kitchen, where the evening meal is prepared with wartime rations, and where every ingredient is treated with reverence. As the sun dips below the horizon, the heart of the home, the kitchen, becomes a place of quiet industry. Here, in this warm, lamp-lit space, the realities of wartime rationing shape every meal. There is no waste, no carelessness, only careful planning and resourcefulness. The coal range dominates the room, its blackened iron surface radiating heat. A simmering pot of water stands ready for washing up, while another holds tonight's supper, perhaps a stew, thickened with pearl barley and flavored with a precious scrap of bacon. Meat is scarce, so bones are boiled and reboiled for stock, and every last scrap of fat is saved in a tin by the stove. On the wooden countertop, a mixing bowl sits ready. Flour, carefully measured. Not the fine white kind, but coarse wholemeal, bolstered with oats or barley to stretch it further. A single egg, if the hens have been laying, or a spoonful of golden syrup to bind the dough. Baking powder is a luxury, so perhaps a pinch of bicarbonate of soda mixed with a dash of vinegar will have to do. The pantry is a study in thrift. Jars of preserved fruit, peaches or plums bottled in summer when sugar was still available, a tin of condensed milk saved for special occasions, potatoes stored in Hessian sacks to keep them from sprouting, and always a careful tally of ration coupons tucked into an envelope. So many ounces of butter, so much tea, so little sugar. The teenager stands at the counter peeling potatoes. The knife moves steadily. The skins fallen in thin curls to be saved for the compost or fed to the chickens. Their hands are practiced. This is not their first time helping, nor will it be the last. In a time when every pair of hands is needed, even the youngest learn early how to contribute. A cup of tea is brewed, weak, with a single teaspoon of leaves used twice over. The milk, if there is any, is carefully poured from a small jug. Sugar is a rare treat, so most take theirs plain. The first sip is warming, comforting, a small moment of calm before the evening truly begins. As the stew bubbles and the bread bakes, the kitchen fills with the kind of warmth that has little to do with the stove. It is the warmth of shared labor, of a family making do, not with resentment, but with quiet determination. There is pride in a meal well stretched, in a pantry carefully managed. Soon the family will gather at the table, a sturdy wooden thing, scarred from years of use. The stew will be ladled into mismatched bowls, the bread broken and shared. Conversation will be light, perhaps a story from the day, or a letter read aloud from a faraway soldier. But for now, there is only the rhythm of the knife, the hum of the wireless, and the golden light of the kerosene lamp flickering against the walls. In the next part, we'll step into the sitting room, where the wireless plays and evening hobbies unfold, knitting, mending, and the small, careful crafts of a world at war. As the last traces of daylight fade beyond the curtains, the family drifts toward the sitting room, a space of worn armchairs, knitted blankets, and the steady glow of the wireless set. Here, in this quiet corner of the house, the evening stretches out in slow, familiar rhythms. The wireless, a polished wooden box with a woven speaker cover, sits on a side table, its dials carefully tuned to catch the evening broadcast. The sound is not crystal clear. There's a whisper of static, a distant hum beneath the announcer's voice. But it doesn't matter. The news is listened to with solemn attention, the comedy shows met with quiet chuckles, the music programs with nods of recognition. The teenager sits cross-legged on the rug, a darning mushroom in one hand, a sock stretched over its curved surface. With a needle and wool salvaged from an unraveled jumper, they work in small, even stitches, reinforcing a thinning heel. It's not exciting work, but it's necessary, and there's a quiet satisfaction in making something last little longer. Nearby, their mother or grandmother clicks knitting needles together, turn a skein of homespun wool into socks for a soldier overseas. The pattern is memorized, the movements automatic. Knit 2, purl 2, round and round. The wool is coarse, dyed in muted greens or browns, practical and uncomplaining, just like the hands that work it. On the side table, a stack of magazines sits neatly folded. The New Zealand Listener, perhaps, or Women's Weekly, filled with ration-friendly recipes, knitting patterns, and letters from readers. A crossword puzzle, half finished in pencil, waits for someone to return to it. The paper is slightly yellowed, the ink smudged in places, but every page is read thoroughly before it's set aside. If the teenager isn't mending, they might be sketching. A pencil and school exercise book repurposed for doodles of farm animals or planes or the occasional caricature of a teacher. No fancy art supplies here, just what's on hand, used until a pencil is a stub too small to hold. The room is lit by a single standard lamp, its fabric shade casting a warm, dim glow. No one thinks it wasteful to sit in the semi-dark. Electricity, like everything else, is used sparingly. Shadows stretch long across the wallpaper, flickering when the coal range in the kitchen shifts and sighs. Outside the night is still, no traffic, no sirens, just the occasional rustle of a hedgehog in the garden or the distant lowing of a cow in the paddock. The blackout curtains are drawn tight, not just for wartime regulations, but because the night, in this quiet corner of the world, feels like a thing to be respected. There's no rush in this room, no sense that time is slipping away. The evening unfolds, as it always does, in small, patient tasks, in shared silence, in the comforting hum of the wireless. In the next part, we'll climb the stairs to the teenager's bedroom, where the rituals of winding down for the night begin. Upstairs, the house settles into deeper quiet. The teenager's bedroom is small, just enough space for a bed, a dresser, and perhaps a wooden chair draped with tomorrow's school clothes. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of lavender from a sachet tucked beneath the pillow. A candle flickers on the dresser, its light barely reaching the corners of the room. There's no electricity here, just the warm, wavering glow that makes shadows dance along the wallpaper. The teenager undresses methodically, shirt folded over the chair, trousers smoothed and laid flat, socks rolled together to be washed on Saturday. At the washstand, a chipped enamel basin holds cold water from the morning's pump. A sliver of ration soap is used sparingly, just enough to wash face and hands before bed. The towel, though threadbare in places, is hung neatly to dry. There's no rushing, every motion is deliberate, unhurried. In winter, a hot water bottle might be tucked under the blankets, filled from the kettle and wrapped in an old jumper to keep the warmth in. But tonight, the air is mild enough to sleep without it. The bed is narrow, its iron frame slightly squeaky, the mattress stuffed with wool and straw that rustles faintly when moved. Beneath the patchwork quilt, stitched together from flour sacks and outgrown dresses, the sheets are crisp and slightly rough from line drying. There's no central heating, no plush pillows, just the honest weight of wool blankets layered just right for the season. Before sleep comes, there might be a few minutes of reading, a borrowed library book, its pages worn soft at the edges, or a letter from a cousin serving overseas, read and reread until the words are memorized. The candlelight is too dim for long reading, though, and soon the book is set aside. From downstairs, the murmur of adult voices drifts up, low, indistinct, perhaps discussing tomorrow's chores or the latest news from the war. The wireless has been turned off. The only sounds now are the sigh of wind through the eaves and the occasional rustle of leaves against the window pane. Eyes grow heavy. The candle is blown out. One last puff of breath, then darkness. The day's small worries, a missed math problem, a friend's careless remark, seem smaller now, fading into the quiet. Tomorrow will come with its own rhythm. The clang of the school bell, the walk home past the neighbor's orchard, another evening much like this one. In the next part, we'll step outside into the early morning, where the world is still damp with dew and the day's first chores begin. 4 o'clock. The world is still wrapped in that peculiar hush that comes just before true morning. Downstairs, the coal range exhales a last wisp of warmth from yesterday's fire as the first thin light filters through the kitchen curtains. The teenager rises in darkness, dressing quickly in yesterday's clothes still draped over the chair. The woolen jumper smells faintly of wood smoke and grass as it slips over their head. Garters are tightened around socks, scuffed school shoes waiting patiently by the bedroom door. Downstairs, the morning ritual begins with the striking of a match, the sulphurous hiss, then the warm bloom of a kerosene lamp's glow. Hands still sleep-soft fumble with the coal scuttle, layering yesterday's cinders with fresh nuggets of fuel. A twist of newspaper, another match, and slowly the fire comes back to life. Outside, the frost-crisp grass crackles underfoot. The milk billy clanks against the gatepost as the teenager makes their way to the shed. Hens murmur sleepily in their coop, stirring at the approaching footsteps. The metal feed scoop dips into the grain bin with a hollow thunk scrape that echoes in the morning stillness. Back inside, the kettle begins its slow song on the range. Breakfast is simple affairs. Yesterday's bread, toasted on a fork before the fire, spread thinly with honey from the neighbors' hives. Tea leaves are measured with care, just enough to color the water, not a speck more. At the kitchen table, the teenager's breath still comes in small clouds. They eat methodically, watching through the window as the world turns from gray to gold. Somewhere down the lane, a farmer's boots crunch on gravel as he heads to the milking shed. The day's rhythm is beginning. In the growing light, the lunch tin is packed, 2 slices of bread spread with beef dripping, an apple from the storeroom, a square of homemade cheese wrapped in waxed paper. The school satchel receives its contents with familiar precision: pencil case, exercise books, the carefully repaired geometry set. By the time the sun crests the hills, the house is awake in earnest. The wireless crackles to life with the morning news. Upstairs, blankets are folded back to air. Downstairs, the smell of toast and tea lingers in the air like a promise. Today will be ordinary, and in these times, ordinary is gift enough. In our next part, we'll follow the morning walk to school, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the slow gathering of classmates, and the small adventures found along country roads. The front gate creaks shut behind them, its familiar whine as much a part of the morning as the school bell yet to ring. The metal lunch tin swings gently in its sugar bag sling, bumping against the teenager's thigh with every other step. This walk, 2 miles if it's a day ending in Y, is as familiar as the lines on their palms. Country roads in 1940s New Zealand aren't so much paved as tolerated, a ribbon of packed metal that turns to pudding in winter and powders to dust in summer. Today, it's perfect walking, damp enough to keep the dust down, dry enough to avoid puddles. The teenager's shoes, rizzled twice already, know every dip and ridge by heart. Half a mile in, the first walking companion appears. Jack Morrison from the dairy farm up the lane, his boots perpetually crusted with what everyone politely calls farmyard matter. There's no greeting beyond a nod. They've walked this road together since primary school. Jack's lunch tin smells suspiciously of mutton sandwiches and pickle, same as every day. By the old oak tree, the one with the hollow where they once hid a pet hedgehog, the group swells to 5. Marjorie with her perfectly plaited hair, Jim still wiping sleep from his eyes, and little Dot, who insists on walking despite being small enough to hitch rides in the Robertsons' cart when it passes. Morning traffic consists of Mr. Peterson's bicycle, back tire slightly flat as always, and the occasional farm cart. When the Robertsons' draft horse clops past, there's the usual debate: walk faster to keep up or slow down to avoid the dust. Today, they choose the middle way, close enough to smell the horse's oat breath, but far enough to dodge flying gravel. Along the fence line, nature provides its own lessons. Pukeko chicks scuttle through swampy ditches. A fallen branch reveals a universe of pillbugs and centipedes. Marjorie knows every wildflower by name. That's bidabid, that's Maori onion. Don't touch that. It's loya vine for a reason. The walk is never just a walk. It's a daily safari where the prize is reaching school before the bell. At the 1-mile mark, the road dips where the winter creek floods. Today it's dry, revealing a mosaic of cracked mud that begs to be stomped into smaller pieces. Jim finds a perfectly round stone for his collection. Dot discovers a blue-tongued skink sunning itself and insists everyone look without touching. The schoolhouse appears suddenly around a bend, a single-story wooden building with a corrugated iron roof that turns summer afternoons into bakehouses. The bell hasn't rung yet. There's time to trade apple cores for marbles, to compare homework by the drinking trough. Somewhere inside, a blackboard waits, with the yesterday's sums still visible in ghostly chalk lines. In our next part, we'll step inside the classroom, where inkwells sit like tiny black mirrors, where the smell of chalk dust and carbolic soap mingles with the fidgety energy of 30 farm kids pretending to pay attention. The schoolhouse exhales the accumulated breaths of generations as 30 children settle into their places. Sunlight slants through high windows, illuminating swirling galaxies of chalk dust above the blackboard. The air carries that peculiar school smell, a blend of carbolic soap, wet wool drying, and the faint metallic tang of inkwells freshly topped up. Each desk tells its own story. Initials carved along the edges, ink splotches shaped like continents, grooves worn smooth by decades of restless fingers. The teenager's seat still bears the ghost of last week's doodles, hastily erased with a damp sleeve before morning inspection. Morning begins with the register, a ritual as precise as a military roll call. Present Miss Thompson echoes 30 times in varying degrees of enthusiasm. Absences are noted with a concerned frown. In rural New Zealand, a missing child might mean anything from whooping cough to being needed for lambing. Lessons unfold with rhythmic certainty. Arithmetic problems march across the blackboard in perfect formation. Geography means tracing maps with tracing paper so thin it tears at a sigh. History is the Great War remembered by teachers who served in it, their voices catching at certain battles. The classroom hums with small sounds. The rustle of a secret note being passed, the squeak of chalk struggling to write on a damp spot of blackboard, the occasional thud of a dropped pencil case scattering its precious contents. Ink monitors move between rows with their porcelain jugs, filling wells without spilling a drop, a task requiring more concentration than the arithmetic lesson itself. Mid-morning brings the clatter of the milk crate, half-pint bottles with cardboard stoppers chilled by the morning air. Children sip dutifully, some making mustaches the teacher pretends not to see. The cream line at the top becomes a coveted treasure. skimmed off with the edge of a ruler when no one's looking. Discipline is maintained through sheer presence rather than punishment. A single raised eyebrow from Miss Thompson silences mischief faster than any cane. The worst offenders might find themselves writing, "I will not chatter in class" 100 times. Good practice for penmanship, if nothing else. By lunchtime, the blackboard is a palimpsest of half-erased lessons. Desks bear the evidence of morning labors. Blotting paper tattooed with ink fingerprints, pencil stubs worn down to fingernail length, the occasional treasured fountain pen filled with forbidden blue ink instead of regulation black. In our next part, we'll escape to the schoolyard, where hopscotch grids are drawn with stolen chalk, where the big kids play bull rush near the incinerator, and where a single ginger nut biscuit can buy you a week's worth of playground favors. For 20 precious minutes, the schoolyard transforms into a self-governing nation. Here, the currency isn't pounds or pence, but marbles, ginger nut biscuits, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, a single treasured American comic book passed around until the pages soften at the edges. The younger children cluster in ritual circles, elastic stretch between ankles, chanting rhymes, dictating the next jump. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, punctuated by the smack of bare feet on woven cotton. Nearby, a knucklebones tournament reaches fever pitch, the sheep bones clicking like tiny castanets with each perfect catch. Older students hold court by the incinerator, that sacred ground where bull-rush games turn boys into legends. Collarless shirts flap like battle standards as runners dodge the tigers. The rules change daily, but the hierarchy remains. Fastest runners at the top, the uncoordinated praying not to be last picked. At the edge of the asphalt, the swap meet convenes. A marble with a cat's eye swirl might fetch 2 milk toffees. A wartime comic could be yours for a week if you trade your father's army button, strictly temporary loan. The teenager watches as Marjorie barters half a crunchy bar, miraculously uneaten since Christmas, for a first go on a genuine store-bought skipping rope. Teachers patrol like benign monarchs, breaking up fights before they start, but allowing skinned knees to be earned. The first aid kit contains 3 items: iodine that burns like fire, a roll of gauze older than some students, and the universal remedy: rub some dirt on it and get back out there. The bell's inevitable clang sends ripples through the yard. Marbles are pocketed, half-finished games marked with sticks pushed into the dirt, to be resumed tomorrow, if the rain holds off. As lines reform, the social order resets. Playground kings become ordinary students again. The shy find their voices, and everyone checks their pockets to make sure their trades weren't stolen back. In our next part, we'll follow the afternoon walk home, where empty lunch tins become cricket bats, where secret shortcuts through paddocks risk encountering bulls, and where the day's gossip is dissected with the gravity of wartime diplomacy. The walk home moves at a different rhythm than the morning's purposeful stride. Satchels hang looser, shoes scuff more deliberately through the gravel, and the empty lunch tin, now repurposed as a makeshift cricket bat, swings lazily from its strap. There's no hurry. The afternoon stretches ahead like the road itself, full of small detours and discoveries. The usual group fragments at the first crossroads. Marjorie peels off to check her snares for rabbits. Jack lingers by the Robertsons' fence, hoping for a glimpse of their new tractor. The teenager and a handful of others take the forbidden shortcut through Old Man Harris's paddock, where the bull is supposedly chained up, but no one has actually checked. The paddock yields its treasures, a pheasant's egg warm in its nest, a perfectly straight stick that just might make a decent fishing spear, blackberries stolen from the brambles along the fence line, eaten quickly before the stains give them away. The juice tastes like summer and guilt in equal measure. Home announces itself first by smell, wood smoke, and baking bread, then by sound, the rhythmic chop of kindling being split, the clang of a bucket at the well. The teenager's mother stands at the line, pegging out washing with wooden pins clenched in her teeth. A nod is the only greeting needed. There are chores waiting. The satchel is hung, the good shoes exchanged for scuffed work boots. First task, water the vegetable garden with last night's dishwater, carefully carried in a dented tin pail. The cabbaces glisten, the carrots stand a little straighter. Next, eggs to collect, still warm, sometimes flecked with straw or the occasional feather. Twilight chores have their own cadence. The coal scuttle needs filling from the shed. The dog, a shaggy farm collie of indeterminate age, gets the scrapings from the dinner pot. There might be a letter to read, painstakingly composed by an older brother overseas, the handwriting grown unfamiliar between leaves. As dusk settles, the house exhales. Curtains are drawn against the cooling air. The wireless murmurs in the background. Upstairs, the bed waits with its familiar dip in the mattress, its wool blankets smelling faintly of camphor. Another ordinary day folds itself away like clean laundry. In our final part, we'll observe the quiet hour before sleep, when the world narrows to the circle of lamplight, when a borrowed library book becomes a portal, and when the distant whistle of the overnight train carries with it dreams of tomorrow. Night in 1940s, New Zealand doesn't arrive with a flick of a switch, but in gradual retreat, shadows creeping up walls, colors leaching from curtains, until finally only the small island of lamplight remains. Here, at the day's quiet edge, the teenager prepares for sleep as generations have before them. Tonight's reading is a battered copy of Treasure Island, borrowed from the school's traveling library box. The spine cracks familiarly at Chapter 12. The lamp's glow turns Jim Hawkins' adventures golden, though the teenager's eyes grow heavy long before the Hispaniola reaches anchor. A scrap of woolen blanket finds its way between thumb and forefinger, an old comfort habit from childhood, the fabric worn impossibly soft. Downstairs, the wireless has been silenced. Adult voices murmur over the last pot of tea, discussing tomorrow's weather, a neighbor's new baby, the distant war that flickers at the edge of their peace like far-off lightning. The clink of cups being washed in the enamel basin carries faintly up the stairs. The candle is blown out with practiced breath, one quick puff that leaves the room bathed in moonlight. Now the familiar shapes emerge, the dresser's outline like a ship on the horizon, the chair piled with clothes becoming a sleeping animal. The bed creaks its nightly protest as weight settles into the feather mattress's hollow. Outside, the world continues its nocturnal business, unseen. A hedgehog snuffles along the garden path. The neighbor's tabby brings some small offering to the back step. And always the wind moving through the macrocarpa trees. That same whisper, that lulled the teenager's grandparents to sleep in this very room decades ago. Somewhere in the darkness, tomorrow waits. The same satchel by the door, the same walk to school, the same rituals that stitch the days together. But for now, there's only this, the even breath of sleep, the distant rumble of the overnight train carrying its freight of dreams, and the quiet certainty that morning will come when it's ready.